Welcome to the WanderLearn Show. I'm your host, Tapon. In this episode, I interview Benjamin Wallace. He's the author of a brand new book that came out this year. It's called The Mysterious Mr. Nakamoto, a 15-year quest to unmask the secret genius behind crypto and Bitcoin. I ask him a bunch of questions, including, why should we be curious who Satoshi Nakamoto is or who he was? What's the percentage chance that Satoshi Nakamoto is more than one person? What's the percentage chance that he's dead? Assuming he's alive, what's the percentage chance that he will voluntarily reveal himself in his old age or via a dead man's switch? Who are his top 4 candidates? Talk about why his OPSEC is so impeccable. Is it realistic that he faked so much of who he is? What insights did he get since he wrote the book? What's the percentage chance that we'll definitively solve this mystery? What surprised him in his investigation? And many more. Enjoy this interview with Benjamin Wallace. I loved your book. Absolutely adored it. I read through it like just savoring it. But of course, I'm into this whole thing. And let's start off with the basics, which is like, why should some people, or why should we care who the creator of Bitcoin was, Satoshi Nakamoto? We don't even know if it's a him or her, they. So very briefly, in less than 60 seconds, just tell us why should we care? Because I know why we should care, but what do you think?
I believe, and I think it's, not hard to argue that Bitcoin and cryptocurrency are, one of the most revolutionary technological innovations of the last, let's say, 25 years. So learning who the inventor of that seems sort of on its face interesting and worth knowing. There's that old quote about, why climb Everest? Because it's there. Why try to learn who Satoshi Nakamoto is? Because he's there. In addition to being an incredible invention, the mystery of who invented it is the greatest technological mystery, in memory.
I'll tell you another reason. I mean, if we didn't know who invented alternating current, Nikola Tesla, we don't know that. Or we don't know who did the telephone, or we have no idea who did, who Gutenberg was, I don't know. Just somehow technology for printing just came along magically. And here we have printing technology and we don't know who invented it. It's like, come on, especially since the fact that it's so recent that it's just, happened in just 15 years ago. And we don't know who it is with all the technology that we have. It's crazy. So to me, it's a fascinating mystery, and we should find out.
Exactly. I mean, we don't know and can't know who invented the wheel, but if we had the chance to know, of course, we would take it.
Thank you. Excellent point. Okay, next question, which is, now I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions, Ben, that are percentage questions, and I know you don't know the answer, despite you being probably the foremost authority on who are all the potential Nakamotos out there, but just give me your gut feel when I ask you these percentage questions. And I know you don't know the answer. I understand that. But just your best guess, because your guess is a lot better than 99% of the people out there, probably. Okay, so number one, is he more than one person? What's the percentage chance that he's more than one person? What does your gut tell you?
So let's say less than 30%. Can I elaborate why?
Yes.
First of all, secrets really are just impossible to keep, right? So you start adding people, it almost certainly leaks in some way. There's a disagreement between the parties, et cetera, et cetera.
There's another thing is that the OPSEC, or the operational security, is much easier to just one person to keep, digitally not let something leak. But once you throw 3 or 4 people inside there, then all of a sudden you've made it exponentially more likely to happen.
Another concrete reason is that at least with all of the communications that Nakamoto made on email and in the forums, I mean, according to expert stylometrists, they are consistent with one voice.
Right. And stylometrists, for those who don't know, are people who kind of analyze the way people write and their diction, their style, where they put their commas, whether they write in British English or American English. And this also applies for coding. You dived into that little. You actually taught yourself how to code. Crazy, man.
Exactly. And
one of the arts degree from you.
It was a challenge for this English major. It's not as simple as, it's not looking for just like, oh, this person uses weird words and that person uses weird words, or even just sort of obvious surface things. I mean, what's amazing about stylometry, which is done, sort of via machine learning, is that it picks up on unconscious and preconscious things that would be very difficult to deliberately fake, ranging from the use of, extremely banal and everyday words like the and of and the frequency of them and how they're spaced, which, believe it or not, are unique to each person. Like it seems like something that wouldn't be so unique, but actually at the machine learning statistical level, you can individuate different users of English.
That is fascinating. I mean, you really delve into that because in some ways, that's all we've got. We don't have any fingerprints of Satoshi Nakamoto. We don't have any like blurry photos of him. We don't even have like a Sasquatch photo of him. I mean, we got nothing. And so we just have his writing. That's it, right? We don't even have his voice. Nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So we got to look at stylometry of his code, how he wrote the Bitcoin white paper and everything. Some people say, and you entertained this notion in your book, that maybe he knew all along that somebody was going to do this, that Benjamin Wallace is going to come after him. So he decided to obscure and obfuscate his whole trail before the crime was committed. In other words, before he created Bitcoin, and purposefully had a randomized engine to like make him seem like a British person when he's not, or put two spaces after the period when he normally never does that, and all sorts of other quirks about it, because he knew that that people like you would come chasing after him. So he did this ahead of time. To me, that sounds like bullshit, but what do you think?
I actually I don't put a ton of weight in the sort of used a scrambler, because I'm not actually sure that technology existed in 2007, 2008. Or even necessarily deliberately added British English or double spaces after periods. I do think, however, that whoever did it did sort of execute perfect operational security from the get-go. And that has actually led me to warm to the theory that the person could be either in the national security world or adjacent to it, because who does that OPSEC by default? Only people in that world. And in 2008, there was no reason for Satoshi Nakamoto to have great confidence that anything was going to happen with this experimental thing they were dropping on the internet. I mean, it really could have gone nowhere. So
Everything else had gone nowhere, right? Everything else went nowhere.
Everything else went nowhere. And the idea that it would become as massive as it has would be really unforeseeable. So that leads me to think like it was just someone who would do this anyway, who had the chops to do the perfect OPSEC, but also just the motivation because it was their default way of being.
Right. I think that's an excellent point. And yeah, and then the problem is the NSA and other types of security organizations that are really tight, the CIA and that kind of stuff. There's so many people who work for the NSA and CIA, and are, it's so opaque of an organization. Both of them are. And of course, it makes it very difficult to figure out. And then of course you throw in the British, they have their own, Secret Service and all sorts of other places. I mean, that's really
totally. And it also, it doesn't have to have been a, MI6 operation or an NSA operation. It could also have been someone who works for one of those organizations or as a contractor who did it as a moonlighting project, right?
Right. Just
but who is
but
obvious, exactly.
Right. Doing it as the default, though, he's just used to just covering his tracks and being anonymous.
And there is no back and forth between the worlds of cypherpunks, right? This group of 90s libertarian cryptographers who many people believe Satoshi must have come out of. And there's not no revolving door between that group and the NSA. I mean, both groups are full of cryptographers. Yes, the politics might seem very different, but someone who in the 1990s was involved in the cypherpunks, could easily have later, turned 30 and gone to work for the NSA.
Yeah. Totally. That makes sense. Okay, what about the percentage chance that Satoshi's dead?
I think that's a tough one. That's a tough one because, Satoshi could be a Unabomber-like character, right? And nobody knew who the Unabomber was other than the Unabomber until the Unabomber was caught. So there is the possibility that Satoshi is this kind of otherworldly superhuman monk who just has like incredible self-discipline and the power to renounce a fortune and worldwide fame, etc. That's a possibility. Death is an appealing explanation for a lot of the things we know, like why has Satoshi not touched this incredible fortune? Why has Satoshi not come forward to claim the glory and all of the, it's not just the sort of shallow fame. It's Satoshi would have a lot of opportunity to have a lot of power and impact if he took the credit. So, and the fact that we haven't heard from them, in so long, I mean, all these things make death an appealing explanation.
So what percentage then? Your instincts, your gut.
I'm going to say 50-50, because then there's also the national security possibility. Can I ask you what your percentage is on that?
Oh, that's a tough one. I still think he's alive, so I would say probably 25% chance that he's dead. That's my guess. But I'm probably wrong. What about if he were alive? This is my little fantasy, is that he has a dead man switch. For those who don't know, that means that basically let's say you get an email every month, and the day you have to click on a button, say, yes, I'm still alive. Yes, I'm still alive. And then the day you don't click on that button, it automatically, something happens, like you upload a video, or, if you're a programmer, you can set a chain reaction. So Satoshi could have a dead man switch so that when he dies, boom, he reveals who he is. Any chance of that happening?
I mean, I like that. I like that. I like that idea. But then you have to suppose, I mean, why would death be the magical moment when Satoshi would be okay with being outed? Because that presumes he has no family who would incur any of the sort of harmful effects of, being associated with that vast fortune. What I will say, though, I am optimistic that we're going to find out at some point who Satoshi is or was, because, again, going back to the Unabomber, which is always weird to invoke because obviously Satoshi, didn't commit a crime or harm anybody, but, someone knows something. So, again, the Unabomber knew who the Unabomber was. No one else did. But the way the Unabomber got caught is because his brother and his sister-in-law, they did suspect something. David Kaczynski knew that he had a weird hermit brother out in Montana who shared a lot of the kind of anti-industrial society, anti-technology beliefs of the Unabomber. And so, and the sister-in-law thought there were a lot of similarities in the writing and the ideas once the Unabomber published his manifesto. So there's someone out there who knows that, their brother, their kind of reclusive brother, disappeared for 3 years. And during that time, for some reason, he had 20 computers in his house. I mean, so at some point, I just think the information will come out, whether directly from a dead man switch or from a Satoshi deathbed confession, or from a relative or business partner or someone like that, who at a minimum will come forward and say, I mean, this happened with DB Cooper, with that mystery. A bunch of people, have said, my dad was X or whatever. Something like that, I think, will happen with Satoshi. And then secondarily, if it is national security related, at some point that will be declassified.
Right, but the DB Cooper thing is not a perfect analogy because we still don't know who he was.
Sure.
Good, but I hear your point, and I agree with you that, okay, so that brings up another percentage question, which is, what's the percentage chance that you think that in this century, or how about in our lifetimes, which is roughly at best 30, 40 years that we've got left, do you think that Satoshi will be unmasked?
I think he will be. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to say 80%. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that's great. I mean, I think that's amazing. What I really hope in this podcast is that everybody buys the book. I want you to sell 100 million copies, because that's the equivalent of getting, just like we caught the Unabomber because the New York Times put his whole diatribe on the New York Times. If everybody read your book, Ben, then somebody would start saying, oh yeah, I see that list. Because in fact, you have this great list, if I can pull it up here, of all the characteristics that Satoshi Nakamoto should have, like his software skills, the coding little quirks. He should be the right age, the right geography, the right schedule. In other words, his working schedule, that's a little bit tricky. The way he uses English, maybe his nationality, his prose style, his politics, his life circumstances. Did he have the time to build this project for 18 months that it took him? His resume, his emotional range, because Satoshi has a certain character, and you've met a lot of characters in your book that just don't have the emotional connection. They're assholes, or they're just, they just don't have that kind of cool, nice vibe that Satoshi always had in all his writing. And the motivation to create it, the rationale, the monkish capacity, and all this other stuff. So there you got a great list. And you came up, what would you say are your 4 top candidates then?
I think it's more than 50%, but it's none of the people we've talked about. So any of the people I name, will be like, if it is someone we know about, then my top candidates are Nick Szabo, Al Finney. After that, it gets a lot narrower. I might actually really say those are the only. Actually, no. Let me add some people. Ray Dillinger, who did early code review on Bitcoin and actually was like a pretty good stylometry hit on the pros that. And I had some expert stylometrists do this for me. That's beyond my capability. And even though I ultimately disqualify him, I think James Donald's a very interesting candidate because of his presence at the creation, the fact that he was the very first person to respond to Nakamoto. He definitely had the politics. He definitely had the chops. He had some of the software and technical similarities. He's a recluse. He is, definitely asshole number one in terms of like, that's why I don't think he's Satoshi. But I think I think most likely is that it is someone we have not heard of.
So that
maybe or someone in
10% chance, 60% chance. So it's not even in your book.
I think it's even maybe a 70% chance that it's someone who's not in my book. It could be someone who was in the orbit of one of those people, but who never really had much of an internet footprint. Because I think the fact that no one really is sort of the perfect stylometric match makes me think that it's probably someone we're simply not looking at. And it doesn't mean there's someone who was completely divorced from these circles, but it could just be some really hermetic person who who revered these people and followed their work closely and then just did this.
It could be a name that we all scratch our heads. I remember when the HBO came out with their documentary and they listed, was it Tyler or what's his name?
Peter Todd.
Yeah, thank you, Todd. What? Who? I mean, you probably knew him already. He was probably on your radar, but how many people on your database, Ben? Do you have like
over 100? Over 100.
Yeah. 100. So it could be like number 97, and you're like, EK, it was on my list, but he wasn't in my book.
I mean, I'll tell you, the one person who came up in my research show, it was very interesting because he was the closest stylometric hit. He was someone no one had ever heard of, although he actually was a regular contributor to that cryptography list. His name is Travis Hastlick. And separate from that, on some random, website years ago, someone in the comments had said, Travis Hastlick invented Bitcoin. And then during my stylometry, work, I find that like this random guy on that list was the closest hit. And I ended up interviewing Travis, and I sort of dismiss him, but only because there's zero sort of precursor references to him having any interest in this ever. And so it would just be like he had to wake up one day and decide, now I'm interested in this, but he had never shown any particular interest in it previously. I mean, maybe, but I do think that was kind of interesting.
I love this quote from your book. I'm going to read it. Quote, this is you saying, I'd learned to code, inflicted my overheating laptop and obsessive preoccupation on my forbearing family, recruited a machine learning expert and a stylometry specialist and a private investigator, and made a 37-hour journey for a 3-minute encounter. I was pretty sure no one had spent as much time as I had trying to solve this. I'm sorry I'm laughing, but I've been careful not to fix a single candidate or theory without solid evidence, but I was starting to feel with kinship with Sahil Gupta, who couldn't be persuaded that Nakamoto was anyone other than Elon Musk. At some point, I needed to stop. Sorry, but
no,
I feel so sorry for you, Ben. I feel your pain.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's
right. Are you still married?
Exactly. No, they're amused. They're amused. But I mean, I was sort of, I was satiated by my quest. So I remain interested, but I no longer feel this compulsion to like track down further leads and go down further rabbit holes about it.
Okay. Have you picked up any new insights since you wrote the book, since it got published? There's usually a big lag. Is there anything else that popped up on your radar?
I mean, the number one thing is that I've warmed to this national security idea or national security adjacent idea, just because it really would explain so many things. I mean, the the arguments for it actually being a national security agency I don't find completely convincing. And one of those is like in order to pay, assets in sort of hard to reach places. And I know that you took up Bitcoin for a similar reason. So maybe I'm, underplaying that idea. But, for it to become a useful thing when they launched it, they would have to really believe that it was going to scale, because it only becomes useful as you get a big network of people who are transacting in this, and you have some liquidity and you have some fiat on ramps and off ramps. I don't know, that's a possibility, but it seems like a little bit of a stretch to me. And another thought as to why they would have done it was to essentially set up a honeypot where, it would create this kind of anonymous network, criminals would start using it, and they would meanwhile be standing by watching the transparent blockchain. Seems a little bit of a stretch to me. But that's why I think it might not be one of their operations, but it could be someone just sort of in their penumbra who, has sort of the same skills and the same general approach, and has, but who we've never heard of and has no internet footprint.
Yeah. Anything that's while you're investigating, because you spent 15 years of your life really thinking deeply about this question, sometimes really intensely. Anything that surprised you in your investigations, Ben?
I think the thing that surprised me was that Bitcoin kept growing. When I first read about Bitcoin,
you wrote it in 2011 in Wired magazine, the first article saying the rise and fall of Bitcoin. And I loved how you said, like, finally have a cryptocurrency that you can pay things if you can manage to not get it stolen or ripped off. And then I was thinking my brother, who bought 10 Bitcoins for $1 each, and then the very next day got it stolen. So your title for that Wired article was perfect. Yep. If you can manage not to get it stolen, it's great.
Well, I bought $200 worth at $17 a coin, and lost them because I put them in Mt. Gox, the safe and secure exchange at that time, which then imploded in 2014. But and so my article 2011, the rise and fall of Bitcoin, it joined one of more than 400 other articles that were written then and subsequently on this website called Bitcoin Obituaries, that's sort of making fun of people like me who sort of prematurely, stated the demise of Bitcoin. But it really was crazy how it kept going, shooting up and then completely plummeting and then coming back from the dead. And it kept doing it. And now we know that that's what it does. And so that there's almost, you can sort of understand it's going to come back again. But at the time, there really wasn't a reason that it would do so. And so I kept being surprised not only by its survival, but how it just kept rising. And now, of course, we're, up at like $115,000 a coin.
You're right that I got into Bitcoin almost by accident because I was in Sudan and they had a complete economic embargo. None of the credit cards worked. PayPal didn't work. Western Union didn't work. MoneyGram, nothing worked. No bank, no wire transfer, nothing. And I needed money because I needed to get out of that. I had a car and I needed to fill up my gas tank to drive out of Sudan. And I couldn't. And then also I was like brainstorming. I had heard of Bitcoin, and then I was like, okay. So I got Bitcoins and I met this guy and I sold it and got cash out of it. Immediately I bought 6 Bitcoins and I sold all but one. I just kept one for shits and giggles. And then I started studying it, and it was fascinating. And that's when I saw it going from 20,000 down to less than $4,000. I thought to myself, you know what? All these coders, they're like still gung ho. They haven't lost any energy, and they're like, this thing is not going to die. So I was like, you know what? I think it should make a comeback. So it was interesting.
Yeah.
And somehow it finally did.
I also similarly, and in parallel, and the reason why I waited so long to write the book was it only became a book because the mystery kept not getting solved. Like I was kind of amazed that it didn't get solved. And so eventually I was like, I got to take another run at this because it's like just so crazy given how big Bitcoin has become at this point that we still don't know who invented it.
You kind of had this affinity and you kind of admitted, like you almost want Nakamoto to be Hal Finney. So for those people who don't know who Hal Finney was, he was the first guy who ran Bitcoin and talked to Nakamoto. I think he's the first. And he was he died of Lou Gehrig's disease, or was it ALS? And he died like 2 years or something like that after Bitcoin really took off, or was taking off, should I say. And he was just a really wonderful guy, not autistic like 99% of the other nerdy Bitcoiners out there who were at the very beginning of it. It's just somebody who is just very personable, easygoing, and just a lovely human being by all accounts. And in some ways, you could kind of imagine. But why is it that you don't feel that, even though that's who you want? Well, I'm putting words in your mouth. Do you want him to be?
100%. Yeah. I mean, I would love for him to be Satoshi for all of the reasons you mentioned. And because circumstantially, there are a lot of reasons to think he could be Nakamoto, right? I mean, he was really the more than almost anyone, he was the kind of cypherpunk world person who had been enthusiastic about this idea of creating digital money and had actually created his own implementation of a cryptocurrency before Bitcoin called RPow, which was based on, Nick Szabo's BitGold. And he had, he was super into sort of pseudonymity. He was a kind of libertarian light, like he wasn't, totally hardcore, but he definitely had some of that philosophy. He had the coding skills. I mean, he was a real operational coder. His career had been spent on PGP, this public key cryptography for the masses. So many, and he was the first person to transact with Nakamoto. The first transaction on the Bitcoin network was, I think, 10 Bitcoins. Nakamoto sent to Hal Finney. So he was the first node in the network besides Nakamoto. And he was one of the two people who did code review on Bitcoin before it launched as software in January of 2009. So there's so many reasons. And also the fact that he died in 2014 he would sort of, maybe that's why we haven't heard of it. But then there are, of course, a lot of counter reasons that have to make us doubt that he actually was Nakamoto.
The only thing I can think of is that he wants to protect his family, because he was already, practically what's the term when the SWAT teams come to your house?
Yeah, exactly. He swatted. His family had been swatted.
Right. Yeah. And so I can imagine that experience taught him, like, yeah, I should just keep my mouth shut and not make Fran, his wife, and his whole family get irritated. Right.
Right. But I mean, you could say, okay, he knew he was dying of ALS. Like, why wouldn't he have donated, what is now $100+ billion fortune to like an Cure ALS foundation? Like, I'm not sure that he, in some ways, if he was Satoshi, by not conclusively sort of announcing that, I'm not sure that he spared his family from trouble, because people continued to think he must have been Satoshi and probably to harass his family.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, here's one other thing that I just a question to throw out there that I think has been sort of under-examined is, like, people talk about, like, why hasn't the $1.1 million, the 1.1 million Bitcoins that Satoshi, controls, why has that never been touched? And if Satoshi Nakamoto is alive and has no intention of using those coins, why wouldn't he send them to a burn address, which would immediately decrease the money supply by 5%? It would be great for Bitcoin. It would remove any uncertainty around those coins and the possibility that someday they might get dumped on the market and affect, and sort of at least temporarily deflate the price of the coin. And it would really say, okay, this is a selfless, benevolent monk who, is only doing Bitcoin for the greater good.
A lot of people who've been accused of being Nakamoto, he could also protect them. And just like he did it with Dorian Nakamoto, he said, I'm not Dorian Nakamoto. Because like Todd, for example, just got completely harassed after this whole HBO thing came out on him. And that's debilitating, especially if obviously you're not Nakamoto. So he could protect a lot of people's identity if somehow he could say, I'm dumping this here, I don't know, and here's a bunch of people who I'm not, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's, but I'm very happy to hear that you think that we're actually going to solve this, just like we eventually solved Deep Throat, who was the whistleblower in the Watergate scandal. And so you think that somehow this will pop up one way or another, but not necessarily because Satoshi wants us to know, just that somebody somehow will leak, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Let's hope so. Okay. And then last question about James Donald. Why did you scratch him off your list? I had never heard of him before, but then as you were writing about him, he's like, oh my God, is it just because he's kind of rough around the edges kind of guy?
I mean, he was the person who during my entire process, he was the one guy who I thought was Nakamoto. I thought I had found Nakamoto. because there were so many reasons to think he could be Nakamoto. And yeah, I mean, the number one reason I remove him from contention is because he has a very different personality. He is a really just like he spews extremely objectionable beliefs into the world. He's an ideologue. He's not the kind of calm, cool, collected character that Satoshi, was. And he also, I mean, I will say he doesn't, since I've been to his house, not uninvited, he does not live in great splendor. I mean, he lives a pretty simple life, very pleasant, beautiful view of the ocean, but in this remote town in Australia, but, nothing particularly fancy.
Right. Yeah, and that just doesn't sound like him. He should at least have a Lamborghini in his. Well, great. Thank you so much for taking the time, Ben, for telling me your side of the story about this thing. And I really hope we solve this thing. And I really recommend everybody who's listening to this show to go get his book. It's to me, unmasking Satoshi Nakamoto will be the coup of the century for anybody who picks it off. I hope it's you. I hope you somehow figure it out. But the book is called The Mysterious Nakamoto, a 15-year quest to unmask the secret genius behind crypto and, of course, Bitcoin. So congratulations on a fantastic whodunit. Nobody got murdered. It wasn't a crime to create Bitcoin, but effectively it's a whodunit. And we still don't know who did it. And I hope we find out soon. But I think your book captures the painstaking research that's involved in trying to crack this nut. And what I really admire about you, Ben, is that you didn't take the easy road. In other words, you could have easily just called it a day, like the guy who said it's Elon Musk, and just call it a day and just use confirmation bias to just constantly just reinforce your little idea. But you didn't. You resisted. You took the hard road, which is, no, I'm going to keep playing devil's advocate. And it comes to an unsatisfying answer, which is, I don't know, we don't know. But it's probably the closest to the truth.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Francis. Really appreciate it. Good talking to you.
Likewise. Okay. And that ends this episode of the WanderLearn podcast, where we explore travel, technology, and transformation. If you'd like to see the show notes with links to what we've talked about, go to WanderLearn.com and click on this episode. If you'd like to connect with me, just remember Tapon. That's my first initial and my last name. Tapon is always my social media username. My website is ftapon.com. Do you want to leave me an anonymous voicemail where you can make a comment or ask a question? Then go to speakpipe.com/ftapon. Furthermore, if you'd like to get rewarded for supporting my projects, then go to patreon.com/ftapon. That's where you can pick up some remarkable rewards for as little as $2 a month. Now, 5 quick favors. Number 1, subscribe to the WanderLearn podcast. 2, download it. 3, share it. 4, review it. And 5, sign up for my newsletter at wanderlearn.com. Our theme music was composed by Eric Stratman. This is Francis Tapon, encouraging you to wander and learn.